This beautiful sound is an oboe, played by Catherine Lee. I'm Robert McBride. Full disclosure, the oboe has for a very long time been one of my very favorite instruments in all of music. And more recently, Catherine Lee has become one of my favorite oboists, partly because she plays so beautifully, partly because she plays oboe and oboe d'amour and English horn, and more about that anon, very soon. And because she improvises very freely, which very few oboists are comfortable doing, and because she has such wide-ranging interests beyond music and including other kinds of sounds and photography, the image on her new CD, Remote Together, is in fact one of her photographs. And if you can guess what this is, you get serious bonus points. Catherine, thanks for all you do, including the time you're about to spend telling us about Remote Together.
Thanks so much for having me here.
This piece is called Nocturne. It was written by Jordan Nobles. It's the shortest and most straightforward piece on this recording. And it's really beautiful. What do you want to say about it?
I really wanted to begin this recording with Nocturne because for me, it sounds really Baroque sounding. And it was really important for me as I was putting the idea of this CD together that I begin somewhere that is really understandable for people. Both myself as a musician, as so much of my research as a doctoral student was based in Baroque music, but also it's an understandable place for listeners. Because throughout the CD, I take them to a bunch of places that include a lot of sounds that people are not used to hearing, especially maybe with the oboe. And so I really wanted something very understandable at the beginning. And I also really love this piece. I've played this piece as an ensemble, as it's meant. It's an ensemble piece, and you're supposed to be all spread around this wondrous space. And I've worked on this piece with students of mine, and they've performed it. And I'm just so grateful that he agreed to let me record it as a solo piece, because it's really meant to have multiple voices. And I think that it's a gorgeous, gorgeous melody in this piece. And it's very simple, understandable beginning.
One thing that we can all be thinking about and wondering about as we go through aspects of this recording together. There are 6 pieces on Remote Together. Today, you and I will focus on 3 of them. One thing to think about is how much of the time is Catherine Lee improvising and how much of the time is she reading the music? We don't know. And I don't mind having that mystery at all. You have said that you particularly enjoy improvising with the oboe d'amour, and we'll hear you do that next. Why that more than the oboe or the English horn?
You know, I've thought about that a lot, and part of me wonders if it's because I've never had lessons on the oboe d'amour.
Oh,
I've never ever had a teacher help me with reeds or tell me how to play in any way on the oboe d'amour. So I wonder if that has a little bit to do with it, but also I think it's the structure of the instrument itself.
Can you show us both instruments?
Sure. So this is an oboe. And you can see it has a lot of keys on it. It doesn't get that wide necessarily. It has a flared bore. But when you look at this versus the oboe d'amour, the flare is more.
So it gets more bigger.
Yeah, it gets more bigger.
And it has a bulb on the end.
And there's a bulb on the end here. Yeah. And so there's something, and it also has a bocal in the top, whereas the oboe doesn't have the bocal. The staple,
right, the little thing between the oboe and the body of the instrument.
Pardon me?
The little thing between the reed and the body of the instrument is called a bocal.
Yes. And on English horn, which most people have probably seen in an orchestra setting, it's just longer, and the bulb is bigger and the instrument itself is longer.
Right. So the piece... Sorry?
So, and also the English horn, it's a little bit more straight as well. So of the oboe family, the bore of the oboe d'amour is the most flared. And I think that it's also this flaring of the bore in itself, which not only creates the characteristic sound of it, but also makes for timbral pitches, altered pitches, multiphonics. All of them do multiphonics well, but it does all those kind of in-between sounds, in my opinion, better than the other two instruments.
And we're going to hear those sounds in Alluvium and also in Silkies, the other piece that we'll be exploring together today. Alluvium, the word refers to deposits of sand or soil or rocks left by flowing streams. Like think of a river delta, for example. And this relates to a beautiful painting called Tidal Drift by Constance Fowler, which is on display at the Hollyford Gallery in Salem. And you are the one who put together this show. And so I love how it relates so beautifully to this piece. And the piece uses an interesting technique of pitch where you're making microtonal changes in pitch, so smaller intervals than we're accustomed to hearing, the same way that a stream would deposit all these rocks and bits of sand without any hard demarcations. So they go together so beautifully.
Yeah, I was really happy to be able to put together this exhibit at the Hollyford Museum. And it was really exciting to be able to go through their collection. Unfortunately, I couldn't look in person due to COVID, but I went through online, and they have an amazing online catalog for anyone who wants to spend some time in the afternoon looking at beautiful pictures. And so I was able to look through, and as I was looking through, I found the work of Constance Fowler, and I loved the movement in her paintings. I loved the texture in the paintings. And I loved kind of like how up close you could get to them and how far away it was at the same time. And I really felt quite strongly that these things related so similarly to what I'm doing in Alluvium. So at certain parts, I could have almost used parts of her painting as a score. Oh, I'm playing all these little bits of debris. And then at other times, I'm playing more of a landscape. Those are directions that I guess I've given myself on top of my directions by Taylor. At sometimes I feel like I'm a little particle of something in the water. And at other times I feel like I'm a kind of like a larger body of water. And I'm shifting between these perspectives in this piece as we shift from one tonal center to the other. So we have some really gnarly bits in there as well, as things kind of clash a bit, but it's never edgy. It's very smooth moving.
Alluvium by Taylor Brooke, played by Catherine Lee. I almost said oboist Catherine Lee, and you are, but there you're playing the oboe d'amour. And that beautiful painting by Constance Fowler, Tidal Drift, going so perfectly with the microtonal drift of the music. Constance Fowler, by the way, started the arts program at Willamette University back in the 1930s. And you teach at Willamette, so very nice connection there. Remote Together is the title of the new CD by Catherine Lee that we're celebrating today. And in a little while, you'll get to hear the entire disc. You'll also get to hear an interesting remix, which is kind of a summation of all the pieces on the recording. We're focusing on 3 of them today. And we're especially focusing on Silkies. How in the world did an oboist from Canada who lives in Portland find herself raising silkworm moths? And how did that lead to this music? Boy, this could be a long answer, huh?
Yeah, I'll try and make it as succinct as I can. Basically, in order to have silkworm moths, you have to have a mulberry tree. One of my neighbors happens to have a mulberry tree. And there's a woman in our neighborhood who raises silkworm moths, and she collects mulberry from his tree. And she knew that he had some children, and so she gave him some to raise. Now, one day I was at the park with my son, and our children were playing together. And he started talking about these silkworm moths, and I was really excited. And so we went over to see them, and he could see how excited we all were by these. They were the big larvae. They were a big caterpillar phase at that point. And so he asked if he wanted some, and I was over the moon. I was like, yes. So we went home with a little box of silkworms, and the rest is history. They make this little sound as they're moving and eating. Some people say it's their feet moving. Some people say it's their them eating the leaves. But it's this drone, like ning, ning, ning sound that gets louder as they get bigger, right? Because they're eating more, and they eat all the time. That's what they're doing. They're eating until they become in the cocoon phase. And I was talking to my husband about the sound and how it was so amazing, and I just loved them, and they were so interesting. And he said, well, why don't you make a piece with them? And I thought that was a fabulous idea. And you
started on it right away.
I did that afternoon. Yeah, I started on it, and that was it. And I belong kind of to a really cool group of musicians at the Creative Music Guild, and it really means a lot to me that this is being hosted by them in the Extradition series, because I feel like they're very much my artistic home here in Portland. And there's a woman that we've never actually worked together, but we've played on concerts together and know each other really well, Juniana Lanning. And I have long admired her work and tried to come up with a project that maybe we could work on together. And we were at a concert together, and I just went up to her and I said, so I have these silkworm moths and I really want to make something. And her eyes lit up as well. She was like, yes. It's like, yes. And that was it. And it's been the most remarkable creative experience, I think, of my life. It's been a really wonderful thing to be able to work with her and to work with the moths.
You talked about the process of you two working together as a kind of call and response, but not in real time. And this gets us to the title of this recording, Remote Together. You were working together back and forth, sharing files, but never in the same room at the same time. This is a metaphor for the year 2020 and what we've all gone through. And what the two of you came up with is so interesting. The sounds, the munching sounds, they're what sound like drumming sounds. I can imagine these little guys doing drum circles in there. And even some explosive sounds, which are surprising. So she's taking the recordings that you made of these little critters and then manipulating them in various ways. And then you're creating an oboe part to go with that. This long lined oboe part, because as you told me, the silk threads that these creatures create when they make their cocoons, they can be 1,000, 2,000, 3,000 feet long. Amazing. And that's why they were bred to produce these threads so we can make silk scarves and such, or in your case, music.
Yeah, they're a really, really amazing creatures. And the other thing that, as we were working, back and forth with this is that there was a spaciousness to it because of we couldn't be in the same space together. So I think in some ways it ended up being a very different type of response perhaps than it would have been as the live piece that it was originally conceived to be. It kind of went further and deeper, and also I think allowed both of us to be perhaps a little bit more vulnerable than we would in a live performance situation, because I'm recording, for example, in my living room on a very small Sony recorder, hoping my son isn't going to come running through in the evening, and I'm just very quickly doing these tracks trying to get out my part. And so it was such a different process and things that were going on, even like worldwide, the things that were going on. So it was
Let's talk about the video. Shall we
Mhm.
talk about the video? And
Yeah.
getting back to this cover image on the CD, which is one of your photographs taken with your phone on a microscope. Tell us what this is.
That's the exoskeleton of a silkworm.
Zoomed in really close.
Yeah.
Amazing. And the video is more of this kind of thing.
Yeah. So as we were making the video, I had taken all these pictures because I was just fascinated by them. I was recording everything I could, the patterns they were standing in the box. I was like, that could be a score within itself. I was like, any information I could get from these silkworms, I was trying to gather. And so I had hundreds of pictures of them in different phases. And, but for the video, we also wanted it to be abstracted a little bit. So many of the photos, though they are of real images, they're maybe like up close. And it wasn't until I'd taken that sequence of photos, my son had recently asked for a microscope, and we were looking at everything in their house underneath the microscope. And I was like, well, let's look at the silkworms. And we did that. And then I started taking pictures. I was like, okay, wait a minute, this is it. And then that gave us the key for the abstraction of everything else. So it was very important to the process, because the sounds within themselves are abstract. You don't know what you're hearing. You're like, what is that? I don't know. And that's what I like about it, that it leaves a person questioning and also amplifies sounds that we don't hear in our everyday lives, or maybe sounds that we think are as unimportant, but can be so interesting. That's really what I'm really interested in, like as a musician. What are those things we don't hear, and how can I listen to those differently? And then change the perspective and point of view while mixing it kind of with non-traditional improvisation forms, give a shift to traditional oboe repertoire.
I had a thought listening to Silkies, and in particular, listening to Juniana Lanning's manipulation of the sounds of the munching and of the wings fluttering. And I thought, is this what it would be like to hear from their perspective? Like, what do you hear if you're in a cocoon? We know that babies in the womb hear sounds going on. Your son, when he was in there, heard you playing your oboe. Wow, what would it be like to hear from inside a cocoon? This piece kind of gives us some idea of what that might be like. So there are these silkworms listening to you playing your oboe, Catherine Lee. And it all comes together in this amazing piece called Silkies on your CD, Remote Together, which is a metaphor for how we all are living now in the wake of the year 2020. But this goes back much, much farther, because silkworm moths were domesticated in China over 5,000 years ago. So I like that timeless quality, even though in a way, this is a very specific souvenir to the year we just endured. It goes back a long, long ways. You're blowing a lot of minds, Catherine. The CD, Remote Together, the physical version, ends with the piece that we've been sampling, Silkies. But you, gentle listener, get to hear something additional today. And if you get this recording on Bandcamp, you'll hear it there too. This is a remix by Nikki Martin called An Overture, Oboe-Boros Remix. So you gave Nikki files from the CD and then said, do whatever you want with them?
Yeah. Yeah. And she created this piece that's so beautiful. I think one thing that during this time I've really done more than I ever have in my life before is, in a way, made myself a little bit more vulnerable. So for example, making recordings in my living room so that I can be part of other larger collaborations, or collaborating with people. Even in this way, it's a little scary to give someone complete files and then say, create whatever you want. But the work of hers that I heard was so beautiful that I just was like, I am so excited to see what she will create with it, because her ears are just phenomenal. And at the Soundbox Festival that happens in Corvallis every year, I heard her a field recording piece she created, and it was so, so beautiful, that I asked my friend Dana, who is also on the CD, is the composer of Chanson, do you think maybe Nikki would do something? And she's like, ask her. I was like, okay. So I just asked her, and I'm so floored that she said yes and agreed to. And when I heard the recording that she sent back to me, I couldn't believe it. The way that she'd heard things, like she put connections together that I, who have been working on this work for such a long time, had not necessarily put pieces together, but the way she juxtaposed things and, like hearing the pitch of certain things that I, hadn't necessarily been aware. I was just really, really floored. And it also, I remember going to sleep the night after hearing it, and I was going to sleep and I had all these sounds going around in my head. And it was like I had the album like playing in my head in this like really different way. It was just a very cool experience. And I think what she's created is gorgeous. And then Juniana has created a beautiful video to go with this. And again, with Juniana, she was like, we should make something. I was like, I don't know what, maybe give it a go. And she just made this video. And I was just like, oh man, this is some serious power these women have, serious power. So I'm just so floored by how thoughtful they have been to like my creative outlook. It's very touching.
Nikki Martin's remix of Catherine Lee's CD Remote Together with Juniana Lanning's video for the same. And the beautiful oboe playing of Catherine Lee's photography. If you have enjoyed this conversation with Catherine about how this CD came to be, stay tuned because we're going to play the entire thing. But also I want you to know about a previous recording by Catherine called Social Sounds, which is similar. It starts off with a relatively straightforward solo oboe piece, and you get into oboe d'amour and English horn, and a piece that has wonderful use of whale songs and other sounds. I highly recommend Social Sounds. And there's also this one. I love this cover. This is just a great cover. Catherine Lee and Matt Hannafin, 5 Shapes, Improvisations for Oboe d'amour and Percussion. Catherine, thanks for all you do. It must have been really interesting and challenging and rewarding to make Remote Together.
Yeah, it was a really wonderful experience, and I'm so grateful to all the composers that have written works for me. They really kind of kept me company, even though this was recorded before, most of it was recorded before the pandemic happened. And almost the trajectory of the album was slightly different in a way. The original idea was much more that it would be kind of like my journey as an artist, coming to starting from something very understandable. I've had, all these experiences with working people and then kind of going to these new places and playing and listening in new ways. And it's, as I was working on these recordings and working on mastering them and creating Silkies during the pandemic, it's been really kind of interesting how the project itself has evolved and changed, and how in some ways I feel like it really does kind of echo kind of what we and I have been going through as we move through this time. And also how, as we're emerging sort of in some places of the world, not everywhere, how things are so different and we don't know what we are going forward. So it's so much kind of based in this idea of process. And I'm just really grateful for everyone that's taking the time to listen to it, and for you for being here and talking to me about this. It's been a really beautiful thing to be able to spend time thinking about this last year, and it's kept me company. All these composer sounds have kept me company through this time when I couldn't go and play with other musicians, and it's been really a wonderful thing. So thank you.
Thank you, Catherine. Let's hear the whole CD. Remote Together begins with the same piece our conversation began with, Nocturne by Jordan Nobles.